We have a quorum here this evening. We'll move on to the minutes from the November 21st meeting. Is there a second? There's a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? And the minutes are accepted. Item number 3 on tonight's agenda are the bills. John, are there any?
Probably the most significant bill we have on there is the last payout to Ram Excavating at Hudson for the interior soil removal. That's subject to the agreement that we had at the last meeting.
Are there any questions for John regarding the bills? All right, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to accept bills.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, bills are accepted. On to item number 4, business. And we have a presentation by John first up.
Thank you, Mr. President, HEDRA Commissioners. I'll go through a summary of actions related to the Hudson property and the transfer that we're looking to have here shortly. Specifically before you tonight, there's a couple of actions we're looking for. Number 1 is to hold a public hearing related to the business subsidy. Because the building now is a hotel development primarily, where in the past it was slated for residential, some of the requirements have changed for business subsidies per state statute. So we are under an obligation, because we purchased the property for $3 million, or selling it for $1, to hold a public hearing for that tonight. So that'll be one action. The second action that I have is kind of wrapped up in a couple of different things, and these are a single resolution here that would authorize actions related to the sale and transfer of the Hudson property. Most significant of that is the first amendment to the purchase and development agreement. Within that first amendment, there are other agreements in there, the parking use agreement for the parking ramp, and some amendments to the park use agreement. Now, I'll go through that in a minute here. What I want to be able to do tonight is to walk through a little bit of the history of the project itself and the actions that we're looking for tonight and what's changed. I know this is something that's been before us for quite some time. We've been involved in this property now for over 7 years, and I just wanted to go through some of the history a little bit and how that relates to some of the actions we have before us tonight. So here's the property. I think we all know where that is. 100,000 square foot building, 4 acres on the Mississippi River. This is an interesting photograph here, kind of showing the history of the project here. You can see what the property used to look like. This right here was the original Hudson factory prior to our purchase of it, over 200,000 square feet. We took off a almost 50,000 square foot addition over here, which is shown on the bottom, which was a barrier to the Mississippi River. And with the bridge coming across, this 30,000 square foot addition over here was removed as well. So the plan itself for the bridge was really a great impetus for us to move forward on this project. Another impetus was this. When we take a look at the history of Hastings, being an industrial along the river, we took action over the last 20, 30 years to remove the industrial operations from the river. We had some great successes as you head east in the downtown area, transforming what were once industrial sites into areas for development. This is the last property on the Mississippi River in downtown that is left for redevelopment, and we removed that last piece of industrial. 15 years ago, we went through the Heart of Hastings plan to contemplate development changes on some of the properties within the downtown area. And it's interesting to note here 15 years ago how much this plan resembles what we have before us today. And that is a rehabilitation or preservation of the older portion of Hudson, public open space near the river, this promenade or trail running through here, and then also a possibility for future residential. All of these aspects here are in play for the development coming before us tonight. So some of the project history, as you know, we purchased the property in 2009, or 2010, excuse me, and we've been going through various activities since that time, including demolition of the building, 50,000 square foot building along the river. We've gone through a reuse study, environmental cleanup, partial demolition. We went through early on a reuse study for the building. We wanted to determine what the public wanted to see for the site. Now, as HEDRA first came into this project, and the city first came into the project, our main objective was we looked at the site, its visibility at Highway 61, entering across the Mississippi River. We wanted to be able to have an attraction there that would lead people off Highway 61 and into the downtown area. That was really our primary goal as we set about this. Whether we were to keep the building or to have a site, we had not determined at the beginning. When we went through the reuse study, it was clear to us from talking to the public that they wanted to see a reuse of that building, and they wanted to be done in a mixed-use fashion. One of the things that came up continuously was a banquet facility, which is something that's still within the plans today within there. And so we moved forward with that reuse study. We went and we met with other developers with great concept plans, and ultimately we came up with Confluence Development, chose them as the developer of choice, and worked exclusively with them from about 2014 on. A couple of the projects Confluence has worked on individually, with Pat Regan working with Schoolhouse Square and Premier Bank, and then Bill Whalen with his projects and his expertise on historic preservation in Louisville, Kentucky, towards the right here. So we worked with them originally exclusively 2014. We signed a purchase and development agreement 2 years ago, late 2015, early 2016. What the original purchase and development agreement did was to set the groundwork for sale of the property. And we had certain conditions that we would work towards, and once those conditions were satisfied, we would be in a position to transfer the property. And so that's what we've been doing over the last couple of years. A couple of the key aspects of that we've been working on has been, under the original purchase and development agreement, was the entire property needed to be fully remediated from an environmental standpoint. All the contaminants within the property needed to be removed. Another aspect of it was plan approval, and in particular, State Historic Preservation Office approval of the plans themselves. And so those are two items, very complex items, that we've been working with over the last couple of years. It became evident from all parties involved that we really wanted to transfer the property as soon as we could. And we've been working on an amendment to the purchase and development agreement to allow for that transfer to occur. And I'll go through some of the details of that here in a moment. This is the development that they're proposing today. And this includes the existing Hudson building, which is about 100,000 square feet. It includes this developed park space along the riverfront, as you see here, including some plaza space, decking space here, and other outdoor and event areas, some on-site parking towards the southwest, and then across the street where the First National Bank building presently lies, Confluence Development purchased that a few years ago. They would be proposing to demolish that building and construct a 119 stall parking garage on that site. And this is kind of some pictures that show what it would look like along the river here, on the park area, looking out towards the northeast to the bridge, in that overlook area. And then with the parking garage itself, we'd have a lower level of about 36 spaces facing 2nd Street, and then an upper level of, I think, 83 spaces that would be above that, working with the existing grade that's there. So what have we got before us tonight? What are we looking at? We have a First Amendment to the Purchase and Development Agreement. One of the key aspects of that and changes is we establish certain dates for transfer and certain activities going on. What the development agreement amendment has is it stipulates a closing date of January 22nd, so a little over a month away, which is great. There would be a clause in there that all plans for building permits would need to be submitted to the city by August 1st of this year. And so that's a little bit of a change from what we've seen in the past on it. In talking to Confluence, they require some additional time in order to prepare their building plans and to receive SHPO approval. Now, with the original purchase and development agreement, we originally had SHPO approval as a precondition of transfer, but Confluence has waived that portion of it and will achieve SHPO approval after transfer of the building itself, but it will take some time. The one aspect that this submittal of building permit plans has on the project is because with the possibility of plan submittal in August, and if it was to be submitted as late as August 1st, and building construction was not to start until August, September of 2018, the availability to construct improvements before the end of the year is gonna be more limited. And the reason I bring that up is within our TIF district itself and the bonds that we have for the purchase of the building, we have an annual payment of about $228,000 on that. And we have that based upon the existing site and the limited valuation that's on it. And with the addition or the extension of this date out until August, it may need an additional 1-year payment of that $228,000 or a portion of that, depending on how much construction is done. So we're on the hook for already on the hook for a payment in 2018 of that $228,000. With the later date, when we're looking at 2019, with the later date, we may have a full payment or a significant amount of that $228,000 due with that later date. And so I just wanted to bring that before you for your attention on that. Other ideas, other aspects of it, start of construction would be 30 days with substantial completion by December 15th of 2019. Now within the agreement itself, Confluence has pledged to work towards as much completion as they can by the end of 2018 within the agreement. On the environmental obligations side, under the original purchase and development agreement, we were to have all environmental items complete prior to transfer. What we've come to an agreement on is that we have 2 items remaining within environmental obligations. One of them is the Vapor Intrusion Mitigation System installation, or VIMS. What this is it's a system that will vent out soil vapor from within the ground itself, sort of like an HVAC system. So there'll be an active pumping mechanism or venting mechanism to take that soil vapor out. Because of the complexity of this and because it makes most sense to develop that system or install that system in conjunction with improvements within the building, we've agreed that this is something that should be done during the reconstruction and not prior to closure. But we would be on board as HEDRA and the city for providing expenses related to that, as shown here, about $793,000. Also, there's some sealing of contaminated wood joists and ceilings within the building itself, PCB contaminants, and we'd be pledging $150,460 towards that under the environmental obligation. Those are our estimated costs as we move forward. So that's a change from what we had previously. Now, the amount that we would have to spend or our obligations have not changed. What has changed on there is the timing of it. Instead of us doing this prior to closure of the building, we would be doing this after closing on the building. Some of the other closing obligations that were once on there have been waived. The SHPO approval is a big one here. They will take that on after transfer of the building. Also, approval of the construction plans and permits by the city. That's something that they will do after transfer. And then the VIMS and PCB encapsulation, as I mentioned earlier. So those were the things that would be done after transfer. Another aspect of this is the parking ramp at the First National Bank building. As you're aware, we received a $1.5 million grant from Metropolitan Council to assist with construction of a parking ramp on the Hudson site. And in discussions with Metropolitan Council, they have agreed that the grant funds that were once stipulated for the Hudson building could be used across the street at First National Bank. And so within that, we've have a parking use and maintenance agreement for that property. Now, the property itself is privately owned by Confluence. They've purchased that property. There's going to be a significant portion of public funding via Metropolitan Council that would go into the construction of it. And so within the obligations into the future, the developer would grant a public easement for use of the parking facility so that the entire 119 stall parking facility would be available for public parking. The developer would undertake the long-term maintenance of the structure itself. The city would participate in funding some of the routine maintenance costs, and what they would fund would be the 70% of the structure, which constitutes that upper level. So the upper level routine maintenance costs, which would consist of plowing and maybe striping, nothing capital, but your day-to-day maintenance cost would be the obligation of the city. What we've agreed to do is that we would contribute on a cost standpoint what that would be. Our estimate on that is about $8,300 annually is what that cost would be to do that. The city would maintain general liability insurance for the structure. The developer themselves would have special access or restrictions over that bottom 36 stalls that they could, from time to time, close that up to 5 days a month, 30 days per calendar year for special events and so forth. So that is the terms of the parking use and maintenance agreement that we would have for the property itself. When you take a look at our financial analysis of financial capacity for the property itself, we anticipate our environmental remediation of this property is going to cost about $2.7 million. Much of it we have completed, but there's still a significant portion that would be completed after transfer of the facility itself. And this shows some of the obligations that we have and the obligations that we have yet to come. What we have right now on our cash balance at HEDRA is about $1.1 million, with much of the $600,000 shown here being covered in previous years before 2017. What we're obligated right now is to fund an additional $391,000. And so with the funding of that, we anticipate that our cash balance after this would be about $600,000. This is based upon getting a couple of environmental grants that we've applied for. So we're out right now for about $500,000 in environmental grants. One of them is still pending. One of them we learned on Friday we were denied, but we have another grant application through another party we'll be submitting in January. So if we get both the grants on there, our cash balance would be about $600,000. If we do not get both grants, say we were denied both grants, the cash balance may be about $200,000 after this is completed. When you take a look at the opportunity costs right now, I think we went through earlier that we are levying about $228,000 annually towards debt service on this property, and without improvements occurring within the property, that number is still going to remain. Once we have improvements occur within the building has some valuation through the Dakota County Assessor, that payment will be reduced. And so we're looking forward to being able to do that. And so as far as the actions tonight, what we're asking for is to hold a public hearing for the business subsidy consideration. You can do that shortly here. Also, upon your comfort level tonight, if you feel comfortable taking action on the resolution to authorize signature of the First Amendment of the Development Agreement and related closing documents, you may do so tonight. If you choose not to do so tonight on that, what we would ask is that a special meeting be held on January 4th to take final action on that. The City Council themselves had a meeting on Monday where they examined similar details. With the City Council meeting, we had presented the final amendment to them, I think, about 2 hours before the start of the meeting, so they did not feel comfortable taking final action on that, and that was the reason why they delayed action until the 2nd. Now, with HEDRA here, we've had a couple of days to look at this. If you feel comfortable upon the discussion tonight to take action, if you could feel free to do that. If you'd like to hold off and take action in January, we would ask to hold a meeting on January 4th. And with that, we have representatives here, Pat Regan and other folks with Confluence Development, if you have any questions for them. And again, if you'd like to hold the public hearing now, you may do so. Thank you.
Comments, questions? Okay. Is there anyone that would like to speak to this motion or this idea?
Open the public hearing?
Yep.
Okay.
All right, not seeing too much interest out there getting up at the microphone, so we will end the public hearing and open it up to commissioners. Yes.
I have a quick question for John. This cost of general liability insurance, that's going to be the city's, that will always be our cost?
It would.
And do we have any idea what that will be annually, roughly?
I do not.
Okay. Is it because we're self-insured, so I'm...
Correct. It fall under our general liability
And it was
insurance
only,
that we have.
Okay, and it's only under the structure, correct?
Correct.
Of that parking ramp? Okay, thanks.
Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question for John. What do we, I think we asked you this Monday night at the meeting, but what was the reason for the denial of the grant that we had submitted?
Sure, the grant from Metropolitan Council, I didn't get a specific reason from them. They had a staff report going with recommendations to their board. And looking at that, there was a minimum threshold, point threshold that needed to be met, and we were just underneath that point threshold. So we will ask for more clarification as to what might have been missing or how, get a better idea as to why we were not funded in that manner.
Is this the first time with this project that we've had a grant denied?
We've had a few. I mean, we're batting pretty good on grants, but there's been a few of these environmental grants that have been not granted the first time around, and then with other clarification have been.
The reason I'm asking is the whole thing kind of, well, not necessarily the whole thing, but what's the total amount for grants? 898,900, so about 900,000. That's a lot of money, and it makes me uncomfortable that we don't have it secured at this stage. And now, you had said there are other places we could go to for the grants. Is it something in addition or beyond or outside of the Met Council then?
Sure. Yeah, we have an opportunity through Dakota County. They have a grant submittal in late January that we will apply for $250,000 there. And under their redevelopment incentive grant, we've been awarded that many times in the past. When we went to them, we were awarded last year for environmental purposes, under the understanding that this would be the last time that we would come forward for them. So we would have to maybe eat a little crow on that one and present to them the situation that we have. But they've been very generous in the past at least for awarding monies towards this project.
With these grant applications, I don't know if you can nail down a date when we would have approval from whatever entities there are out there.
Sure. With the one pending grant through Minnesota Deed, and that one's for about $230,000, I believe, we should hear the next couple of weeks on that one.
Okay, and then the grant, assuming we're going to reapply to the Met Council for the other grant, how long would they take to make a decision on that?
Sure. So we've got the Minnesota D grant pending right now. We'll hear back in the next few weeks. We're going to be submitting an application to Dakota County by the middle of January, and we should hear back in probably about 2 months on that one. And then I think there's also opportunities coming up in June. There's a June 1st deadline for another round of grants that's coming up here that we may be eligible for as well.
So it sounds like if we have a closing date of the 22nd of January, we still have, close to $900,000 out there that we're still, that's still hanging out there. It makes me a little uncomfortable. I guess if it was, God, I hate talking about numbers like this, to say, well, if it was only $250,000, I wouldn't worry so much. But I mean, even $250,000 is a heck of a lot of money. But this is a lot of money. And it, you know, we have a closing date of the 22nd of January. I'm just wondering what the other commissioners feel in terms of being comfortable about closing and still having $1 million out there that the city is responsible for, whether we get a grant or not. It's our obligation to provide that. And whether it is maybe more appropriate to hold off on a closing date. I know everybody wants to get going on this, myself included, from, you know, the get-go. But, you know, from a business standpoint, is it more prudent to wait until we get all the ducks lined up in a row? That's my question.
Sure. And Commissioner,
I'm just uncomfortable with that amount of money that's hanging out there.
and I could offer some clarification on the numbers that we have out there. And with the obligations that we have towards environmental, we've got about $950,000 or so between vapor intrusion and the PCB contaminant sealing. Of that $950,000, we have about 2/3 of that are going to be covered through existing grant funds that we have on hand. So we've got a lot of that. We've got about $391,000 right now that we would need to fund.
If I'm understanding this, so even if we spend it out of our pocket as HEDRA, we can get reimbursed for it. We can still apply for the grant and get reimbursed, and therefore the cash gets back into our fund then?
Actually, no, we would need to have the grants would be reimbursed for costs that would incur after they were awarded. So when we take a look at the building project itself, we have, coming into 2018, design work that's gonna be occurring, particularly the plans and the SHPO approval on that one. And I don't anticipate between now and June that there's gonna be much on the environmental side within either the sealing of the property and/or the vapor intrusion mitigation system installation occurring. That being the case, we may be eligible for applications, reapplying for some of these grants if we're unsuccessful in both of them in June, because the work is still pending.
Okay. The estimates, okay, thank you on that. Now, the estimates, the VIMS, vapor intrusion mitigation system, and then sealing the wood joists and ceilings. What happens if those bids come in a lot higher than what we're estimating?
Sure. And Commissioner, with the VIMS cost itself, we have a bid on that. We'll have a contract for that amount. So we feel pretty good with that number there. On the $150,000 estimate for the ceiling, that's a construction estimate that we have at this point that has not been bidded out. But for the larger portion of that, we do have a bid.
Okay, good, good. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Mark?
Joe, I think, I agree. The clarification, I think, if I'm hearing this right, though, we have roughly 2/3 of these grant funds already, so it's not the 900,000 that we're concerned about. We have 2/3 of the grants already. So that's why I'd rather not push any dates out. I'm satisfied with the dates that we have, and I agree with the risks here on this a little bit, but I still think John's been fairly successful on that. But if it was 900,000, I'd be with you. But since we got a lot of the grants already received, the project's moving along, and I feel confident with the numbers that we got on the bid, so I'm happy with what you laid in front of us here, so.
Yes, and given the explanation, I guess I should have concluded, I become more comfortable with it. You've got a really good track record, John, with, you know, with getting the grants put together for us. It absolutely amazes me quite frankly, how you've been able to put these grant proposals out and, you know, end up with really a huge amount of success in terms of, you know, procuring those monies. So, yeah, to echo what Commissioner Vaughn is saying, yeah, I am now more comfortable. You know, we're down to about 250,000. That's not a lot of money, is it?
391,000, Joe, I think that's the number.
Yeah, okay, well, still comfortable. For the record, still comfortable. You know, personally, it just, you know, I've been on the council 9 years, and with the budgets that we've approved every year, you know, it's almost $200 million that I'm a part of approving, you know, over that period of time. And it adds up very quickly. All right, thank you.
Yes, Scott.
Just a couple detail questions. So in thinking about the shared use of the parking garage, recognizing that that makes common sense, but then shared liability, shared use, shared fees can become a slippery kind of decision or difficult decision around unforeseen circumstances, unique circumstances. So I'm just curious if everyone's comfortable at the general level of that sharing, or if there's a way that we can tighten it up, looking back on the city's exposure over the years and what HEDRA's contributed, the city's contributed. It'd be nice to kind of tighten up what that exposure or that liability or that expenditure might be in terms of a not to exceed or some structure around putting some limits on that so it doesn't drift. That would be one observation, if that was thought to be a worthwhile topic to look into. That's just a comment. My general question is, could you help us understand what from January 22nd until August 1st, what that length of time is based upon? And maybe give us a sense of why we're not in a position to move faster, given the time that we've spent talking about this for the last 2 years.
Sure.
That would be helpful, just kind of,
Okay.
I think, as a broader topic.
Okay, Pat, do you want to help with that? Thanks.
Mr. President and Commissioners, the timing on the plan submittal date that was based on a closing of January 2nd, we actually expect to have our plans ready for submittal on a normal project that would be submitted, say, just to the City of Hastings for the building permit. We think we could have those plans done for this building in April or May. But the process, which is just a normal process, but it's time-consuming to have the Historic Preservation Office from the state of Minnesota, they have to approve these plans for us to qualify for the tax credits, which are a contingency for this to move forward. It's a normal process. They have a 30-day plus a 30-day requirement to respond to us and our plans, and my understanding is that oftentimes they'll issue a conditional approval where some high percentage of the project is approved and you can go ahead with your construction drawings, and then we may work out 1 or 2 details or 3 or 4 details within the project with the SHPO office. So it was our understanding and request when we talked about those dates that we try to get the plans in before then, but we can't promise we'll have the plans ready to be built before then because of the process with the SHPO. So that adds a couple, maybe 3 months. We can submit our plans to the city at the same time as the SHPO, as long as everybody understands that SHPO gets to weigh in first. And there is a difference in Minnesota from what our partners are used to in Kentucky and Ohio. The Minnesota SHPO requires full detailed construction plans rather than conceptual plans. We've already submitted conceptual plans to them, and then we waited and decided to change the use of the building and that kind of thing. That was based on their first informal response to us. But now they're waiting for us to submit construction detailed plans based on now what we've come to an understanding on the use of the building will be as the 60-some room hotel and some apartments and then the event center. So that's the reason for what looks like long lead time for the plans to be submitted. They'll be ready for submittal to SHPO well before then, but then we need to hear from them.
I think you started to answer my next question, which was, thanks for that explanation. What, the transition in terms of an intended use from where this began as a predominantly residential development into a predominantly hotel development, you mentioned that SHPO was driving that decision?
When they gave us their informal comments having to do with the windows that needed to be rehabbed rather than replaced, and them wanting us to have the interior walls or the existing walls exposed with no insulation on them, that caused us to double back really and look at using smaller rooms, which a hotel provides for, 12 and 14-foot wide rooms where only the outside wall with the nice window would be exposed, and then we could insulate the new interior sidewalls. That caused us to go back and look at that instead of an apartment, for example, where you might have 2 or 3 of these windows in a 900 to 1,200 square foot apartment and an entire exterior wall exposed in an apartment where you don't have any insulation on it. That caused us to go back to the hotel concept. We actually started with the hotel apartments, then we went all to apartments based on the market studies that we had done, and now based on the SHPO's informal direction, we went back to this plan that shows mostly hotels. And actually the market study's been updated and we've gotten a better response as that time has progressed for the need and the marketability of the hotel rooms.
Great.
The issue with these types of buildings with SHPO, they do not have to follow the energy codes that all the buildings do. They're exempt from energy codes, so it doesn't matter how much it costs you to keep the building, you don't care. It's all about preserving the place there. So largely why I changed to that small one.
Okay. That answers my questions then.
All right. Any additional questions? Yes, Mark?
I think, just wanted to do a follow-up, because Commissioner Sinclair, I do understand your concern about the not to exceed dollar amount. I still feel confident, because I think the applicants they run operations, they understand maintenance costs in their current facilities, and our staff has looked at this number too. So I think the 8,300 potential, they did so much per stall, and I really appreciate the new owners are going to actually be in charge of the liability of the structure, which I think is important, where we got more of the maintenance cost to it. So I'm feeling confident with that number, hearing from our staff too.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that was the number, that it didn't become, the topic of maintenance didn't somehow become a new topic of discussion of what does that mean?
Right.
So recognizing that there's only so much required to maintain a parking garage, I recognize that.
Okay.
Just wanting to draw some clear lines in terms of what we're gonna claim and what the developer will claim over the long term. Because they could add up, obviously, if there's some misunderstanding about who's carrying what.
John, I just want, if you don't mind, Chair, then
Yes, go
I
ahead.
would make a motion that we approve, and I think all 4, we could do them all at one time, the signatures that were needed.
Sure.
And that would be for the Great Rivers Landing approvals, with the 4 different authorizations to follow.
Very good. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion carries.
Okay, well, thank you, folks, and
Thank you.
we will be working very diligently over the next month to put together some closing documents here and get this thing done. And again, we'll be bringing this forward for the council signature on January 2nd, but thank you.
All right, continuing with business this evening, we have resolution authorized economic development loan for 105 East Second Street.
Thank you. Sui Generis LLC has submitted a request for $25,000 loan from our Economic Development Revolving Loan Fund to assist with tenant improvements, which include electrical updates and tenant build-out for the property located at 105 Second Street East. Total project cost for this, which includes remodeling renovations and electrical upgrades, is estimated at $62,110. And the remaining project costs will be financed through equity investments from Sui Generis LLC. So we are looking for authorization to move forward with a 15-year loan for $25,000, and the proceeds would be dispersed upon proof of qualified expenses for the project. And some additional detail, the Sui Generis will be completing tenant improvements to make the space leasable for a new tenant. And the utilization of this funding will help that tenant to have more flexibility and better use of the space, and increase utilization and assist in increased sales and long-term success for that tenant in the space. So I can stand for any questions.
Do you know can you tell us which building this is?
So there's currently an antique store in the first floor. It is the 3-story building with the tan building with green.
Which is the former theater, is that?
Yeah, where that a theater company was a couple of years ago. I
They
can't.
were in, that's the one they were in? This is
Yeah,
the-
yeah,
Okay.
that one.
And Kevin is here too,
Oh,
for any questions.
Yeah.
okay.
Okay.
Fucking damn, the shoe place and then this one.
Got it.
Sure.
Yes.
A quick question, Morgan, I just want to clarify this, because I always read this as a $25,000 loan. Is this a line of credit up to $25,000 if they don't need it? Or
Correct.
So, for most of our loans going out are kind of a line of credit. So-
Correct. So as the expenses are
Sure.
completed and incurred, then they submit to us and then we reimburse.
Up to 25,000. Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
Very good. Are there any additional comments or questions?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. They could come back and ask for another loan at some point, right? This is not the only one that they could apply for. If they got into it further and saw they needed more money, could they apply for further money?
I believe so, as long as the expenditures that they're incurring match the project or the guidelines.
All
Correct.
right, thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay, are there any additional comments or questions? If not, I'll accept a motion.
Make a motion to
All right.
fund.
Yeah, right, we have a first and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? And the motion carries. Congratulations. All right. On to item C, we have an authorized signature, contract for services, Excelligent.
Thank you. So Mincar Real Estate Exchange, also known as Excelligent, is a provider of commercial real estate information, and they have the ability to offer us, the City of Hastings, a few offerings. Sale and lease listings, targeted broadcast emails, and available sites and buildings that are on our city website. The package that we are looking at is the available properties attribute. It is an up-to-date feed on our website. So right now we have available properties listed on our website that's updated by John and myself. This feed would actually be tied directly into the MinCars portal, and so every time a broker would submit information or listings, it would automatically populate and come up on our site. So this would allow, property owners, brokers, any interested parties, the city ourselves, to have this available 24/7 on our website without us having to physically go out to the city and update those properties. So the cost to that is $75 per month, and it would be funded through our marketing budget. So I can stand for any questions you may have about the system or anything about this.
Very well, thank you. Are there any questions or comments?
Just on the functionality side, this is completely compatible with our website and integration in terms of the technology, the feed. That seems simple enough, but
Right.
sometimes you've got incompatible platforms that, one that's custom developed and this is CSS base or something, that they don't really integrate that well, but I don't know if that little detail's been.
As far as I know, it should be fine, but we'll for sure double check that before. But that's a good point.
And you've seen that implemented with, on some other city sites where
Right.
they've put that directly in?
Right, so the city of Elk River has a really robust website, and their property feed, it's great. It's updated all the time. It's very easy, user-friendly to look at. And I just, I think it's a great option for people who are in the community looking for space of any sorts, or even outside of the community that it's looking for what we have available.
Very good. Any additional questions or comments? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second the all
Very good, very good. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? And the motion carries. All right, item number 5, reports and information.
Thank you. I will start with the Vermillion Corridor Plan. So our consultants are preparing a summary of the current conditions and challenges from their meetings with the coalitions and the community meetings and our key person interviews. And so our next planned meeting for the coalition is Saturday, February 10th, with time and location to be determined. And at that point, we will review the information that's been gathered from all of the tools and discuss the issues and opportunities that they have found, common themes along the corridor. On the same day, Saturday, February 10th, we will also be holding a community meeting to gather input, which will be open to all residents and business owners.
Okay.
Location and time, we will update as we have.
Any comments or questions regarding the Vermillion Corridor Plan? Otherwise, we will move on to commercial vacancy, item number B.
Yeah, coming on a commercial vacancy, we haven't seen much change between November and December of this year. And as far as projects that are going on or projects that may be going on, we, council on Monday's meeting approved a rezoning and comprehensive plan amendment to help facilitate the construction of that 3,500 square foot medical office building located at Pleasant Drive and Highway 55, so that's still working its way forward on that one. And I think that's probably all we have at the moment.
Okay. All right. Yes.
I had a question. The Farmers Insurance building that is next to McDonald's, is that a new business then, or did they move from another location in town?
That's a good question, Joe. I don't recall if they were someplace else in town or not. I don't know.
It's just, we have a lot of farmers insurance agencies. I think we have 3 in town. Second only to the Edward Jones offices that are all around the city. I did have a question, Morgan, about the follow-ups that have been happening with Target Corporation. I just wondered if there has been any further dialogue with the company as to how that's going.
So I did reach out with the questions that were proposed at City Council. I have not yet heard back. I was giving them till after the holidays and I'm gonna reach back out to them via phone and email. But I have not yet heard back to those responses to those questions.
Just, I'll actually send you the date of the article. There was quite an elaborate article in the Star Tribune about a week and a half ago about Fergus Falls and their target. Have you seen it?
I have not, but I actually spoke to the economic development person with Fergus Falls, I think a couple days just prior to that article being published. So I haven't read it yet, no.
They're doing a lot, and I don't know if, I don't know if they're trying to stay above water for what is inevitable, but they have a very organized plan. Anything from buy at Target Day, when they had the whole community go and shop at Target, also just, continue pressure in some other ways too, that I found to be rather creative. I was in Target the other day doing some shopping and just kind of got the willies, thinking that in about 90 days it's going to be all shut down. Whatever staff can do to find some things out. I had asked some questions at the council meeting, I believe last month, about finding out exactly what their profit loss information was. And I've talked to people around town. They say, well, I know somebody that works at Target and this is one of the 5 worst in terms of their income. And I've talked to other people that have said, no, they just decided to, take a dart and throw it at the map and decided this was one that was going to go. I'm just looking for, substantial reasons on their part. And also, perhaps a new question at this stage, would they entertain the opportunity to come back and reopen the store? I had talked about, I know they're planning on doing something like 52 mini Targets, whatever that means, over the next year, and whether, we would, whether we would qualify as a mini Target. But what just kept going through my mind as I was walking through the store the other day was that if they close, I don't know if we'll ever get them back. Will we ever get a Target back in our town? And drove to Red Wing last Sunday. There's a Target there. Northfield has one. You look at cities about our size, and what is what's the magic that we could do that would make them want to stay and not close? I still think there's something out there that that would attract their attention in terms of what we could do. Well, when I say what we could do, not necessarily HEDRA, but what can we do as a community to make them want to stay? So I hope that you'll continue to work with them and try and get as many answers as possible. I golfed with, as a matter of fact, I golfed with one of the middle management people from Target. He works downtown in Minneapolis. And, you're out there on the golf course. I had just met him, and he's part of our foursome. And, what do you do? What do you do? And then, the city council in Hastings, and he kind of threw his hands up and he said, it was kind of like Sergeant Schultz in Hogan's Heroes, I know nothing. That's not my department. I can't give you any answers or anything. But I told him to go back and talk to Mr. and Mrs. Target anyway. See if he could get an appointment with them and find out exactly what's going on and what could be done to save it. So, hopefully we might hear something positive. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments or questions?
Nope, I have nothing further tonight. I just want to thank you for all your your help and assistance throughout the year here as we have our last meeting, and staff's very thankful to have the support of this commission.
All right, thank you very much, Sean. Is there a motion on the table to adjourn?
Second. Marks.
Beat you to it. All right, all those in
right.
favor of adjournment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? We are officially adjourned.